Something I try to bring to my classroom is put your identity into something that is authentic to the human experience. Like curiosity rather than just, hey, I did this one time. But that's tough in our social media world. Like we're sort of constantly fighting against that inner culture.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wizard Talks, a podcast where every guest is a wizard in their own unique way. Today, I'm joined by my very good friend John, who is a high school teacher and a fellow former high performing athlete, for a conversation about AI, education, curiosity, athletics, identity, and the search for meaning. We talk about how the world is changing, what young people need to thrive in the age of AI, and what athletics can teach us about discipline and identity, and what happens when you leave something behind after years of it defining you. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. I am once again joined with the wizard himself, John Stedman. He is an incredible friend of mine and a high school teacher, and we had a great conversation this time last year. Now we're looking at a year has gone by. We've gone around the sun. John, welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Will, for having me again. I'm excited. And being an astronomy buff, yeah, a year around the sun. That's a great way to describe a year that people should use more often.
Seriously, right? That's really all it is when we really think about it. But a lot can happen in that time, as I know we'll be getting into today. But you and I have talked off screen about kind of where we wanted this conversation to go, and there was some things that came up. And the first one was you started telling me about some changes in the curriculum that are happening at your school. Why don't you talk a little bit about what's been going on there? What have you seen?
Yeah, so the biggest change that's coming into this year, I'm coming into this, first of all, I'll say I'm coming into this kind of new, just like a lot of other teachers are going to be this year. So all of the thoughts and insight that I have onto this is just anecdotal. So for the viewers, I'd love to hear, feedback when we're done this conversation. But the ministry in Ontario is now going to be mandating attendance as part of the final grade for high schools. So this is a Ontario-wide new thing. So 15% of the final grade in most high school courses, to my understanding, will be based on consistent attendance, which is very new. So I believe that this connects to like our previous topic last year about AI. I think the pandemic is a driver for this as well. And I think back to our conversation last year, and you said something. You said AI is the worst right now that it's ever going to be. We talked about that a little bit, and I think it's sort of an obvious statement, but boy, were you ever correct, because we're sitting here a year later, and AI is so much more prevalent than it even was 365 days ago or a trip around the sun ago. And I think that's a really big driver for this initiative, without me talking to the ministry employees. I'm in favor of this, and I'm excited to talk a little bit about why. So that's the change that is happening. And I think AI and the pandemic are really big drivers of it, just to kind of start our conversation.
So that's interesting. So if I just to make it clear, so students, when they come to school now, they are graded on their attendance, which perhaps was some part of the curriculum in some way before. We wanted students to show up. You can't actually pass the classes if you don't show up at least sometimes. But now what you're telling me is just by being there, they're being given 15% of their grade.
So, like I said, some of the details we're going to learn more about it as teachers as we head back to work in mid-August or what have you. But yeah, my understanding is that 15% of the grade will be based on actually showing up, because statistically, attendance has dropped in high school significantly since the pandemic. So kids are showing up to school less and less. I have some ideas about why that is. Now, sort of a little bit of a counterpoint to what you said, showing up in attendance has always helped lead to success, but there's an increase of technology and what technology can do for students, not just AI, but also, think of when we were in high school, we basically had to show up to know what was going on in our classes. Now, most high schools have an online platform where teachers post all of the content, study guides for tests, things like that. Sort of imagine what we had when we were at University of Guelph, but like a high school version of that that's even better. So if you are a resourceful kid, you can really get away with not being in class and doing quite well in a number of courses. Maybe things like phys ed and stuff is tougher. So I think there's a push to have students be in class because community is important. Kids are finding ways to be successful in courses without actually showing up to school, which, we talked about a year ago. The whole point of school is to get ready for having a job later in life, sustaining relationships, all of the things that you're going to need to be a lifelong human being. So not showing up is not a skill that you want to promote. So how can we have kids value just being consistent and showing up every day? We might need to go to a simple approach like mandating attendance. So it's starting as only 15% of the mark. So it's small, you could say, but it's significant enough that hopefully it's going to make a difference.
Oh, and I think it absolutely would. I mean, 15%. If you're a kid who was just skating by, for example, I was a C's get degrees kind of guy in high school, and I just was happy to have 65%, right? So if I was at that level, but I wasn't showing up to class, I'm gonna be losing a lot of those marks, So now I can just show up and I can get those marks. So there's two things that I think are really interesting about that. One is on the positive note that you're absolutely right. They are by mandating attendance, we're conveying that them being in class is valuable.
Yes.
Right. And I think that absolutely translates into the business world. Showing up, being there on time, being there in person. But on another side, when I think about this, like when I immediately hear about this, is kind of like the participation awards. That you get a ribbon or a trophy just for being there. What would you say on that point? Do you think that there's a little bit of that sense that's going on as well? You just for being there, you get marks to show up.
Well, that's something I'm curious about. I'm curious about how we actually go about, rewarding the students for being. Is it just a matter of like, here's your attendance numbers, and that's the percentage of the 15% that you get? Excited to hear kind of how that all shakes out. But something that I hear a lot from students, and even you mentioned it there, it's like you could lose marks for not being there. I always encourage students to look at it the flip way. So, something I really try to work on with students is if I hand a piece of work back to them, like a performance. Now, in this case, the performance might just be being there. But if I hand it back a piece of work and they say, Mr. Stedman, where did I lose marks? My job is not to take away marks from a student. My job is to award a grade based on the performance. So the analogy that I always like to use is, that game at the fair where you swing the hammer and you hit the platform and then the thing goes up to hit the bell. Forgive me, I don't know what it's called. That is what getting grades in school should be. The harder you swing the hammer, the higher your success is going to be. That thing doesn't drop down from the top because of what force you don't put on it. Right? So what I'm hoping, this is looked at as is me showing up and engaging and contributing to my school community, contributing to my courses, and the curiosity of being there, which is a topic I think we're going to get into, is curiosity. That you're going to be rewarded for contributing to the system. That's the way that I would love to see people approach this versus like, oh, I didn't show up, so I'm losing. Being athletes like me and you, and also something I should mention is I think there is something in there saying that missing school for athletics won't be penalized. So there's going to be some exceptions to this attendance thing, which would have worked well for people like you and me who are kind of athletes, leaning on that versus our academics. But with us for our training, we gained experience, skills, fitness from our training that led to results. We didn't lose our swim races because we didn't show up. That wouldn't be the way that we looked at it, right? It would be I trained harder than this person, and that's how I was able to beat them in a swimming race. So we always want to think about, with students, rewarding them for what they do. And the last thing I want them to think is, oh, I didn't do this, so the teacher took this away from me. I don't take away anything.
Right. No, that's a great, I think, reframe for some of these young kids, who might just be like, well, why do I have to show up? I I know how to do the work. I can do everything. They may even have a little bit of arrogance in them, which may be valid in some ways. That there are some kids that are just more capable. They're able to do the work and do well in their assignments without showing up.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew some of my friends that were like that. They didn't have to go to class because they knew how to do the work. For whatever reason, they just were able to do it. But then this also, like, you said something interesting. You said that kids are showing up less than they used to. I'd love to hear what you think about that. What's driving that? I mean, people have been skipping class forever, right? You and I skipped class. We've skipped class, but we skipped class a lot, actually. But you're seeing perhaps more of this happening. Less people or less of your students are showing up. What's going on there? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, I think it's two things, man. I think AI is one of them. I think we're fighting a really tough battle with trying to, I don't want to say AI proof our classes, because it's also good to encourage students to use AI in meaningful ways, but we're trying to make it so that evaluations are authentic and that we know that it's students doing the work. But I think students are ahead of a lot of teachers, to be quite honest, when it comes to figuring out ways to use AI to enhance their performance, which I think we said a year ago. It's great to use AI to save time, but when you're using it to replace skills as a growing mind, I think that is damaging. So because AI is moving so quick, students are able to, especially grade 11, 12 students, I think they're able to independently complete things with the assistance of AI, and kind of overcome not being in class. So I think that's one thing. And I think the second thing, not that I'm qualified to say this, but I just think the pandemic lended itself to an increased comfort of not showing up, and not just with education. I think it just kind of enhanced the flakiness of our culture. I think people are much more comfortable with the default of staying home when, something's feeling off, or I just think there's an increased acceptance to staying home. And I think that there's a whole bunch of concerns with that. I'm not, qualified to sit here and say, here's all the things that are going to happen. But, as a person who values fitness and exercise and community, I would love to see that change. And that's why I'm so much in favor of this mandate for young kids, just to be at school. Like when I think back to high school, I think of a couple teachers. I'm grateful for the experience, but what I really think of is just good times being there in community. Some of the friends that I met, I think it helps form the individual, and I just think a return to valuing and emphasizing that is going to be good.
Yeah, no, I completely agree that community is so important. That especially when they're young, in your teenage years, your formative years, having social interaction, that's one of the greatest teachers at high school. Yes, we have a curriculum that we want to try and our best to prepare them for the world. And we can have all kinds of discussions about whether or not that actually happens. But one thing that high school does do is it forces you into a situation where you have to interact with people that you may not choose to interact with, right? You have to be with people from different communities and different socioeconomic classes. You have to talk with people you don't necessarily like. You can build connections with people you do really vibe with. You also have to engage with adults, who are the teachers and the staff at the school, which if they're staying at home, or maybe you have some students that maybe they are actually going out and seeing their friends, right? But how often are they actually engaging with adults who they can have a good relationship with, that's not in some ulterior kind of environment? At a school, you actually have to interact with people who are in another generation from you. They have a different perspective, and hopefully a wiser perspective, not always, but we would hope that having more years would build that kind of interaction. So there's something very valuable, I think, about that as well.
Yeah, and I think the diverse perspectives is really important, because let's think about when we stay at home, what a lot of us do, including me. Like, if you're on your phone, you're on the algorithms, you're flipping through Instagram. We know what the algorithms do. It reinforces the thinking process that we already have. So if I have my opinions on things, I got my opinion on who's better, Jordan or LeBron, and I start flicking through algorithms on my phone about it. Most of the things that I'm going to see are going to reinforce what I already think. And, I think part of the reason why, I'm grateful for the life that I've lived is that, in high school, university, like you said, we met diverse adult populations. We hung out with people who thought different things than us. That's a really, really important of growth. So I love that you mentioned that. I think it's really, really important to interact with tons of people. And to use you and me as an example, like you mentioned in university, like we weren't the best people in the world with attending our classes all the time and being consistent with that. But something that we did do is we were really curious with conversation, and it led us to some level of success with the working world. So just any way you can promote that with young people, I think is going to be great. And I want to just circle back really quick to, I think, why making attendance part of the grade really makes sense when we connect it with what's happening with AI, because it's doing so much for us now, and it's getting better so quickly. Like you said, it's freaky, and if AI basically knows everything, and we have access to it, then I think in the future, it's going to matter less and less to know things. Because if everybody has it at their fingertips and I can just acquire knowledge at the snap of my finger, people who have knowledge right off the top of their head is going to be less important than it was maybe 20 years ago. And it was harder to dig and go and get that knowledge. So if AI is going to know everything and we all have access to it, in the working world, what is then going to matter in importance? It's going to be who can show up every day, who can problem solve and coordinate with a group of people, interact with diverse people effectively, who just has initiative and drive. And what this makes me think of is, do you remember on a high school report card, not the mark, but the learning skills, that other stuff? I believe that those skills are going to be things that AI can't do for you. So to make showing up a part of the grade, you're really rewarding students for showing those skills now, as opposed to just like, what do you know, or what skills you can develop. And I think those are actually going to be a great measure of what students are going to need in their future. So I think to put an emphasis on that really, really makes sense. And this is going to kind of lead into another quick thing I want to mention is, I think that those skills, it's easier to predict which of those are going to matter. People are going to need to solve problems. People are going to need initiative. People are going to need to self-regulate their emotions. But we don't know where AI is going. So it's hard for us to know what skills and knowledge we're actually going to need as individuals. And to give you a perfect example of that, I want to talk a little bit about curriculum. So I know we talked off camera about this a little bit. AI is changing so quickly that there are things that have been put into the curriculum kind of recently that I believe are going to now be irrelevant. So this is really, really interesting, because I think school boards are going to have to change the way they roll out curriculum as well.
That's a fascinating point, that as AI is growing and it's going so fast, how does the curriculum keep up? Curriculum has already been a difficult thing to make relevant for years. School boards and different education boards have struggled with this. How do we make it relevant with the times that we are in? And I think this is a problem that's happening, that's being accelerated even more now. So you're absolutely right, John. And when I think about that, I think about even today, what are some of the skills, that just basic skills that maybe kids would be useful for kids to have. One that I can think of is AI prompting, right? So if you know how to prompt an AI better, that that's going to help you in your workflow, in your ability to generate ideas and ability to understand. So what if the school went and made a curriculum that's on prompting, right? And we said, okay, we have a whole class that's on AI prompting, right? Maybe there are some schools that implemented this last year or 2 years ago, and that would have been really, revolutionary and very like progressive and understanding the times. But now in mid 2026, AI is prompting AI. So the need to know how to prompt correctly is not as necessary anymore. What's actually more necessary now, as far as my understanding in the AI world, is knowing what you want. Because if you can get a base idea of what you want, you can tell an AI, I want this, and then that AI can make the prompt that you can give the AI. It's getting very meta. So now that whole curriculum that they created to try and help students learn AI is now irrelevant. It doesn't even matter for them. Because the student's going to get to the class and be like, why would I need to learn how to write a perfect prompt? So yeah, if you could speak on that point, on this idea, right?
Yeah, it's a perfect example. And just to give you another one. So in my grade 9 science course, for example, the most recent change to the curriculum was about 6-7-ish years ago. Our viewers might correct me if I'm wrong on that. But part of the D-Stream curriculum was there were a few things that they added in to teach in the course. And one of them was to implement coding. So students are supposed to use a coding program to outline one of the scientific concepts in the course. So I'm supposed to have the students use something like Python or one of those programs to code something that shows an idea. And we now know that AI is currently better at coding than even the best coders in the world. It's actually the first skill that is better than the world-class people, which makes sense because AI in and of itself is kind of code. So it makes sense that would be its first amazing thing. So even the best coders in the world are no longer coding. To your point, they just figure out what they want. And then they basically have AIs working for them, which is sort of exactly what you were describing there. So to me, it feels a little bit irrelevant for me to have students physically code a concept when even the best coders in the world aren't even doing that anymore. So maybe I'm looking at that a little bit too linearly. I would love to hear feedback from some other teachers. But yeah, to your point, what I think we need is we need the changes of curriculum to either be opened up so that we can sort of have the free reign to have students be curious about what's going on currently, or we need curriculum development to be faster. We know that this is a slow process, especially in North America. And if we wanted to get a little bit deeper with it, I think administration in general in tons of industries is just way too slow. For the viewers of this podcast, you and I had the opportunity to take a trip to Japan. You lived in South Korea for quite a long time. And one of the biggest takeaways that I had from our trip out there was just how quickly those cultures completed things that take so much longer here because of the bureaucracy and just administrative slowness that we have for everything. AI is either going to change so quickly that what we're mandated to do by curriculum is just ancient, and I don't think that's good if people are following it. But you also don't want teachers that aren't following what the curriculum says, because then we're kind of not doing our jobs, or we need to speed this stuff up. So I think that's an issue that is being exposed by this rapid increase in the performance of AI.
Yeah, that's a good point. Of course, things take time. There's also an argument to be made that, trying to make something happen so fast, trying to learn something fast, for example, isn't always the best method.
That's true.
Sometimes we just need more time, because one of the issues that we're running into with AI that we already saw with the rise of social media and smartphones is that they were implemented so fast that no one had time to figure out, what is this? What are the problems with this? How can we engage it?
Right.
How can we learn it? Right. And so that's what we're running into now. So sometimes taking our time is better. However, to your point, there's there are times that we need to be moving. We need to be moving things forward. There are certain parts of this process that need to be implemented now because the changes are happening now. So where I'd like to take this conversation then is, what can we honestly say are the skills that kids really need if an AI can just know everything for them? And that also includes in terms of how to do things, right? If you don't know how to do something, an AI can literally walk you through how to do it in real time, right? I'm a good example of this. I've never cooked before. I was an absolute guy, making the fire in the kitchen and smoking things, and my food would just come out like garbage, right? But now I just have the AI talk me through every step. I say, AI, I am a monkey. I want you to treat me as if I'm a monkey. Okay, so you gotta walk me through every step, and it's like, all right, monkey, here we go. And now I can cook well, which is incredible, So this goes to show that how we do things, even those processes, can be learned through AI, as long as you know how to follow instructions, essentially, right? And so maybe that's one of the skills. But to hone it in here, so let's talk about what do kids need to know, as far as we can understand in 2026. What do they need to know, John?
Yeah, so I'm gonna take 2 steps back to take 1 forward here. So let's use your example of cooking. And by the way, I can attest to you not being able to cook, being your former college roommate. But it's a great use of AI, by the way. You're very resourceful with this. I would implore anyone to have conversations with you about how to use AI. Really cool to hear some of the stories that you have. But yeah, in terms of what do people really need to know, let's use your cooking example. So you wanted to make a meal. What was required of you, even though you used AI in that scenario? I think there were 2 things. One, you showed up in the kitchen. You were there. You were there, and you had the tools available. So you showed up is the first thing. And the second thing is you had some level of curiosity about wanting to explore making something new. Because even though you suck at cooking, I know you know how to make some things. So you were trying to make. By the way, you have the best macaroni and cheese I've ever tasted. So
that's right.
Credit to you.
And a grilled cheese. I used to make a mean grilled cheese.
Yes,
I
you
still
did.
do.
And then left
without AI.
Yeah. No machine. So you showed up wanting to make something new. So you had curiosity, which is something I'm looking forward to chatting about with you. And you showed up. So kind of going back to those learning skills that are on students' report cards, I think that is now the foundation that is going to be so important. Not that it wasn't before, but if AI is all knowing and can give the skills to someone who can interpret basically language, because AI can talk to us, those learning skills are going to become ever more important. I think before, the reason why skills and knowledge was emphasized was because there would be just some people, whether it was IQ or whether it was just where we have natural different gifts. It would take an employer let's imagine a world with no AI. It would take an employer so much longer to teach, computer coding or, medical advancements to someone who just doesn't really have the brain for that. If it would take someone much longer than another person to learn that, you would want to emphasize bringing in people who showed incredible, adeptness to those skills. Like, for example, Len Lom is an intelligent woman. She just could never figure out chemistry, just no matter how many times she tried. But that matters less now if you can ask AI, right? So not that those learning skills were unimportant before. I think it was just more important to try to figure out who was good at what. I think that's going to matter less now. We all have it at our fingertips, and all you need is curiosity. But the people who show up every day and know what they want, going back to what you said. So knowing what you want to be able to prompt the AI, I think will continue to be important.
Interesting. Yeah. I wonder how we could create a course for that, right? And that really would have been helpful to me both in high school and university, which is some sort of program or curriculum that would help me figure out what I want. That would have been very useful to just start to have kids be more reflective, giving them a wide range of what their possibilities are, how to hone into their own skills, how to lean into curiosity. I think so often, this is not even a teenager problem, but this is also a problem just for people in general, is how do we know what we want? How do I even figure that out? Sometimes we just get so overwhelmed with all of the million options that we have. So then we feel paralyzed and we're like, well, I don't even know what to do, right? It's kind of like when we're scrolling on Netflix, right? And there's just too many movies. It's too many, or Spotify. You know what I do? Now I'm on Spotify. I don't know what to listen to. I just listen to the stuff that I used to listen to because I don't know where else to go. I can let the AI algorithm take me away, and that does help sometimes. But in other situations, like I don't know what to pick, and then I end up just closing it because I'm like, I can't even right now.
Yeah, I read something the other day that I heard that watching the same thing over and over again is actually a sign of some level of anxiety, because the unknown of not knowing what you want and then just kind of avoiding that altogether just kind of shows you you mentally don't even want to deal with it. And thinking about what you just said, I that is something I feel for students with, because I think about the anxiety that I went through, being like, I don't know what I want to do. And, I'm kind of glad teaching found me, but I didn't even know what I wanted to do. But at least I knew the careers that were available, in the pool to choose from. The students right now, they're thinking about, I might want to be a lawyer. I might want to do this. We don't even know what jobs AI is going to take away. And I know that's always been a thing with the internet. There are certain jobs that used to exist that don't exist anymore. That's always existed with technology, the rise of technology. But there are students right now that are fearing that their dream job may not exist in 5 years. So imagine that unknown compounding just what we already experienced with just not knowing what we wanted to do as kids. I think there's great mystery in the unknown. I kind of love not knowing what's going to happen next. But for a lot of people, that's an anxiety-inducing thing. And I feel for students who are experiencing that added level of unknown, because what's going to change in the next 5 years. A lot of AI experts are projecting a very different world very soon. Spooky.
Yes. And thanks for calling me out on my anxiety there, because I definitely watched the same movies over and over. I listened to the same music over and over. And I thought it was just because I really liked it. But no, John, it was actually because I'm quite anxious about watching something new. Which, you know what? I laugh, but actually, I think there's some truth to that. It's very comforting to watch a movie that we know, or you watch a show that you know what's going to happen. You kind of have an idea of what's going on here. It's very comforting. And in our world where we're just being bombarded with information constantly and something new happening all the time, I think people are reverting back to that even more. And I completely understand it, because I'm one of those people. I'm like, sometimes I just come home at the end of a week. I'm like, I don't want anything new, honestly. I just want, I remember what show I liked. I'm going to just watch that. And there's some comfort to that.
Yeah, and I'm sure there's some, positive in the spiritual realm when it comes to that. Now, I want to make it very, very clear that I'm the same. I'm kind of known in my friend group for memorizing movie lines. It's some sort of a talent that I have. Maybe it's just a sign of crippling anxiety.
It's all just crippling anxiety. That's it. Everything we do.
Yeah, who knew I'd get so much credit for that? It's crazy.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that I want to touch on what you were just saying then, that the kids are looking into their future, and we've got the highest level tech CEOs in the world, these professors and some of the most intelligent people that we have, that we can see on platforms, telling our youth everything is going to change. The jobs that you think are there are not going to be there. Good luck. And I think we touched on this a little bit last time, but I want to hear again your perspective on how it's been going. What's the sentiment of kids right now? What's the feeling in the classrooms as they are starting to transition out of high school? What's the sense of optimism or pessimism that's in that?
It doesn't feel too different to me, to be honest. I had the benefit of teaching grade 12 classes this past year. I don't necessarily ask these questions to students. Maybe that's something I should do a little bit more. Like, how are you feeling about your career? A lot of them say they don't know what they want to do. But that's what I said at that time. So I tend to kind of just celebrate that as hey, isn't it amazing that you have the whole world in front of you? Yeah, it's something that maybe I should unpack with my students a little bit more. I think things are generally positive.
Great.
Something that I did experience this year is something we call senioritis. Grade 12s that their curiosity really seems to shut down once they have a good idea of where they're going to be next year. This happened to me, so I'm not about, this isn't, hey, back in my day, this didn't happen. But I really think that curiosity is our superpower. And when you see students that are excited to stop being curious because they're just ready for the next thing, I think that's a time where we want to really continue to put energy into our students. What I'm noticing is that kind of take your foot off the gas as high school is ending is happening earlier and earlier. I don't believe that all of this tech that we have access to help us complete things is helping with that. I think it's making it more of a challenge. Students are willing to go to greater lengths to maybe be unauthentic with work. And I think as a teacher, something we need to do is just continue to make things interesting, continue to inspire curiosity in our classrooms, so that willingness to learn is intrinsic, something we touched on a year ago. I'm just going to continue to try. That's all I can promise as an educator. And something that strikes me with all this AI stuff is how you mentioned something interesting about how we don't know where it's going to go, and there's this unknown with it, just like there was unknown about social media. But yet at the same time, isn't it crazy how comfortable people are using it? So we don't know where it's going to go, but over 70% of teens are already using AI for some level of companionship, whether it's therapy or just keeping you company. That's a really big number. So that shows that we don't know where it's going to go. Like our counselors and therapists going to be obsolete. Our lawyers going to no longer exist. The comfort that people are showing towards using this is surprising even the biggest AI experts. So a lot of unknowns ahead, and yeah, we'll see where it goes.
On that point, John, I'm wondering, do you think the rise of AI and all of this technology, is it reducing our curiosity? Is our curiosity, that is an innate part of being a human being, do you think that's starting to erode with some of these technological changes that are happening?
Like, I think it's a big fork in the road, right? Because we can now ask this thing anything. And AI could take you down a curiosity adventure of amazing wonder. If you, like, I think you're a great example of this. Like, you're an innately curious person. You get excited to meet anyone you sit down with. It's one of the reasons you're one of my best friends. So you're a guy who would sit down with AI and just be like, I did all this cool stuff today with it. So I think it can be a road to opening up curiosity and be very, very powerful. But it can also just be a way to enhance your productivity, get everything done so that you don't have to think. And I think when technology emerges, this tends to, a lot of changes, when changes happen in the world, it tends to polarize things. People go one way or people go the other way. So I think AI is hurting curiosity for those who are not using it in an authentic way. And I think it's going to make curiosity better for those who are like, look at all of the things that I can do now. To give you an example, have you heard about the Silicon Valley vampires? Have you heard about this? So, the best coders in the world reside in Silicon Valley because that's where a lot of these companies are. And I was listening to something recently where these coders they used to take so much time to actually do the code for their different. They would have an idea for an app or a program, and they would have to spend all this time coding it. But now they get AI to do it for them, like we were saying before. So now they basically are just using different AI engines to work for them, come back to them, and they prompt the AI more, and it continues to work. So they are actually so excited about how quickly they can now manifest all the different ideas that they have that apparently these people aren't sleeping now. So these like high-end coders aren't getting any sleep at all, but they're very fulfilled in their work because they're able to accomplish all of these things that they were curious about because of AI. So they're calling them AI vampires, which is just, I think, kind of funny. So that's an example of really, really curious people that are using it to not only be productive, but to lean into things that they're passionate about. So I think that is an example where it can go great. I think it can go bad. I think whenever our world changes, people tend to divide. Like I saw this in the pandemic. When the pandemic happened, everything changed. People had to stay inside, and people either got in really, really good shape or really, really bad shape. Some people strengthened their relationships and their faith with their partner, and some people had issues with that. People either really leaned into their work like I did. Some people decided it was time for a change with their work. I think when the world changes, people go one direction or the other. I don't see this being any different with AI.
I agree. And I want to touch on that vampire analogy. That's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating that these people are so excited about what they're doing that they're just not sleeping and they're just getting into it and they're building more AIs and they're growing and doing all kinds of things. That's awesome. And I think this actually goes to that kind of philosophical concept of the vampire, right? So a vampire has a problem, right? A vampire is immortal. He's not going to die unless he goes in the sun or whatever, I guess. You know? But the idea of the vampire is that they don't die. They continue on. They keep living for years and years and years and years.
That's right? A problem?
That is a problem.
Okay.
Well, you could think of one of the main problems is that, of course, everyone around you is dying all the time, right? Mm-hmm. So if you're the only vampire, then it's pretty lonely. It's kind of the elf vampire problem, right? And that's one that's pretty obvious. You know, if you're someone who really, you know, connects with people, which most humans do, that's going to be a problem. You need to make more friends and more families and constantly, forever. Mm-hmm. But there's another one that I think people forget about. And that's simply that boredom can be one of the greatest pathways to despair that are available to us as human beings. Mm-hmm. Because if you live forever, you eventually would inevitably get to the point where you feel like you've done everything, or that you feel like you're like, I know this already. I already know what's going to happen. And this is, of course, exasperated if you're an immortal, right? But this is absolutely a problem for us human beings we do have an end date. Yes. We have an expiry date. But boredom is probably one of the greatest threats to our generation, I think, right now. And some psychologists would say we're in the age of boredom, you know, that people are highly stressed because they're bored. They don't know what to do. They don't know what else to do. And there could be an idea of that there's too many options, right? Which is the paralysis that we were talking about.
Yeah, I was about to say there's never been more things to do.
There's never been more things to do, right? But if you have so many options, you don't know what to do.
It's like the Netflix thing. Yeah.
Yes. And yeah, exactly. And then on top of that, if you have a mindset, you're like, I already know how to do this, or we bring in the AI part, an AI can just get me to do that, you know, or an AI can do that for me. Where is our sense of purpose, our meaning, our drive? This is where curiosity becomes like an essential part of a well-adjusted life, I believe. Because If you don't have that curiosity, you're going to eventually get to the point where you feel like, I know everything. I've got it all. Well, maybe you wouldn't get to the point of saying you got it all figured out, but you're like, I already know that. I know what tomorrow's going to be like. I know what the next day is going to be like. I know that an AI can do my job for me, and I'm just going to be living. You know, I'm just going to be surviving. I guess what's the expression, like surviving rather than living, you know?
Yeah, and I think so. You mentioned that some psychologists said that we're in the age of boredom. Another word that I have heard is loneliness. Do you, you know, I know that when I do things, because some people describe being bored as like I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want to do right now, or I have nothing to do. When I do things, usually it involves having a mindset to kind of serve or be around other people. So do you think there's a connection between boredom and like feeling lonely as an individual? Do you think there's a connection there?
That's a great point, John. Yes, absolutely. Like, I think the two go hand in hand, right? If you're someone who's more curious, like you love reading books and you love writing and you love your little projects and things that you do, I think you can quell loneliness a lot better. I have a lot of introverted friends who love spending time on their own. They still enjoy connecting with people, maybe in smaller groups, for example, but they're very good at being on their own and spending time on their own.
I'm jealous of those people.
Yeah, right? It would be nice to have that. I've been developing that skill over years, and I think it is a skill. I think people who are more introverted, who don't feel as lonely being on their own, are more curious about how they can use their time towards learning something or building something or growing something.
They can satisfy that curiosity without other people.
Exactly, because for you and I, for example, we are more extroverted. We really enjoy people. I mean, we're very curious about people because people are a complete unknown. You never know what they're going to do. You never know what they're going to say, right? Or how they're going to grow in what different direction. And that's what we love about it. But when you're on your own, that's, that can feel very, very lonely. You don't know what else is happening or what else to do. And also I think not even just the fact of the boredom can get us to the point of like, I don't know what to do, but also like, I'm just not interested in anything. Like that is a really hard part for people when they're like, I don't, and this leads to the conversation about depression. I mean, we've got higher levels of depression than ever before, yes. Right? And depression and boredom, I think, go hand in hand. Like it's not only that I don't know what to do, it's all, can be more of an anxious feeling. I think it's I'm not interested in anything. I don't want to do anything. Why would I do anything? And then it can lead to this like despair, and then you're alone, and it just is it's a spiral.
Yeah, and it might also be like a awareness of knowing that there's so many things that you could be interested in. It's like I'm not taking an interest in any of these things, and that is making me sad. And I think this connects to something that we talked about, before we started this conversation, was this idea of burnout. And you said something that really piqued my interest that I thought about my personal experience too. And you mentioned that perhaps this idea of burnout, which was never really a term years ago, it's an emerging term, is that it might be a fixation on productivity over curiosity, which I think kind of connects to what we're talking about here, because, and I'll let you unpack this for everybody in a minute, but when you said that, I thought about my own experience, as a teacher who's a coach of basketball, which is a winter sport in Ontario. The month of November, December are the toughest for me. I'm working a ton. I'm very busy. The weather doesn't help, as we know, in Canada. But the feeling that I have during that month is always I come home and I'm tired, and it's 9:30 or it's after dinner, and I know that I'm too tired, that I'm not about to knock a bunch of things off my to-do list, but I struggle to be present, whether it's with my partner or just I struggle to compartmentalize and just go do something for myself, because I can't stop thinking about all the things that I want to be productive doing. Like, here's all the things that I got to get done, even though I know I've already relented to not doing them because I'm tired. So I'm thinking about being productive, even though I'm not doing it, and I'm not just giving that time to, asking my partner, how did your workday go? And then that hurts my relationship. So when you said productivity versus curiosity, I was like, oh my gosh, that's how burnout feels to me. I'm fixated on being productive, and I'm not just pursuing the joy of like a new human experience. So yeah, feel free to unpack your end of that, because I thought that was really cool.
Well, first off, I absolutely love the vulnerability there, John, because I think, you're speaking to something that so many people are struggling with, and I certainly struggle with this too. And I think it's part of our culture that has really overemphasized the value of making every moment a productive moment, meaning that you're working towards something all the time. And there's value in that, of course, right? Because, we can move towards our goals. But the issue is that where do we find the value of just the human experience, of just being in the moment? Like you said, just being curious about your partner, stopping for a second and being like, well, what's on your mind, right? What's going on there, right? And I've had this experience too. I'm sitting there with my wife and I'm like thinking about all the stupid things that I have to do for my job, for my work, for my other projects, whatever's going on, how I got to get to the next step. Like, it's exhausting, and you wonder why we're so tired at the end of the day. We can't even relax.
Right.
You and I have talked about our issue with video games now. God, when I was young, I could sit in front of that TV and I would just game for 3 to 4 hours without a care in the world. And now, I'm trying to get better at this, but now it's very hard to enjoy that experience for longer than an hour, because then my mind is going to, but I have to do all of these other things, and I'm not moving towards my goals. And if I don't move towards my goals, then I'm not a good human being, or I'm not a good citizen, or I'm not a good and then it just spirals.
Yeah, man, I felt so seen when you explained that, because I'm the same way. It's like I pick up the controller and it's like, oh, you piece of shit. Like, you have things to
You
do.
piece of shit. What are you doing? Get to it, right? And, and then again, like, social media, we don't have to, like, really beat that dead horse, but it does affect me, and I'm sure it does many others, because even just the act of scrolling through, you're watching people who have made videos, at the very least, which means that they've taken their time to make something and produce something, and then, and it can be the most basic thing, but then we're sitting there just consuming, right? And it makes us feel even worse.
And I also think that's, I'm just coming up with this thought here. I also think that's a little bit of false curiosity, because we know that it's dopamine inducing, because the idea of dopamine being released in the brain is the thrill of what's about to happen. Anticipation is what leads to dopamine. So we don't know what's coming next, so we swipe. We don't know what's coming next, so we swipe. But we also know that the algorithms feed things that we already want. So I think in our mind, it's like, I don't know what's coming next. So we have this, there's curiosity there. But if it's just going to keep showing things, like today, I watched one video this morning of someone reeling in a big fish. And then I spent 30 minutes watching people catch amazing fish, half of which were probably AI. It's like, it's sort of like false curiosity if you think about it, which is kind of damaging. So curiosity, if we think back to, like, why was burnout not a term 20 years ago? Maybe it was, but less so anyway.
We didn't hear it that much.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And, why could we play video games 10 years ago? I think it's because we had less productivity that was necessary for us. And there was just maybe a higher value on the curiosity of the human experience, that we were able to pour our curiosity into that activity, without a second thought. Maybe to a fault at the time when we had our university classes and things like that. Sure. So I think that's a really interesting conversation. I would love to hear what other people think about that topic. And I'm just thankful that we were athletes where we had to pour our productivity into more diverse things, not just school, not just our work, but we had our sport as well, which I know is a topic that you're excited to get into a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just that curiosity as a way of perhaps the medicine for burnout, I think is something that we could unpack a little and really think about, that if we're burned out, you just made a good point. If we are burned out, it's likely because we are, I would think that in two different ways. We either have too many things going on, or there's so much focus on one thing, right? So if you're, let's say people get burned out by their jobs, right? Well, what is it that burns them out in their job, right? It's often not the processes that are required to get the job done, right? It's more about the connections with the people in the company or the organization, right? And the overwhelming sense that you're not doing enough.
Yes.
Right. And that and to that point, right, that you're not actually building something. I think that's where burnout comes. You're like, well, I'm just a cog in the machine now. I'm just keeping the things rolling here. I'm getting a lot of pressure from all sides. There's some sense of accomplishment in some ways, but what am I really doing this for? Right? The meaning seems to just kind of dissolve. And how do we reincite that meaning? Through curiosity. How can I make this job more efficient so I can do more work? That I think that's helpful, and AI can help with that kind of stuff. But curiosity of like, how can I communicate better with my coworkers? Curiosity in the sense of how can I find other ways of doing my job to make it more enjoyable, not just less work so I can do more work, right? I mean, because that's what's happening right now. And with the rise of AI, we're starting to lose some of those processes that took up a lot of time in the past. So we're having perhaps more time in our jobs, but we seem to have less. It's outrageous.
Yeah, there's a I forget what the paradox is called. Forgive me, but there's I heard something about the more space in time you give for your job in your mind, you will always fill it with your job. So if you are able to compartmentalize and give a greater portion of yourself to the things outside of your work will get accomplished in that smaller meta space. And that is a struggle that I have, and I am thankful for the professional development at my school that we do some meditation on the Bible. We do some emotional check-ins and some mental health things, and it's funny because I catch myself being like, wouldn't it make more sense if we just like had this time to be productive? But like, no, probably not. It's probably really, really good that we take that time to tap into the other side to kind of fight against that burnout. So if anyone at my school is watching it, I think we are thankful for that, even if we don't seem like it.
Seriously, having something else. I was talking with a coworker of mine who she was doing her master's while working in the organization, and I work in the mental health field. I work at a distress center, right? So, and she and I had started this discussion in which she felt that she was able to do her job better and her mental health got better when she had other things to focus on. Once she'd started school, as much as she ran out of time, the stress of time management is definitely part of it. But she struggled, as I think a lot of people do, when she only had her job. Mm-hmm. When the biggest thing in her life was her job and maybe her relationship or whatever, right? And I've seen this before in myself. I've seen this in lots of my friends, family, coworkers. When you don't have other things that are important or valuable in your life, you can lead to burnout very quickly. And that can be just as something even as noble as supporting a family member, right? Imagine your father or your mother is sick, right? and you give them all of your attention to make sure that they're comfortable, to get their needs met, to make sure that they're getting to their appointments, and you're also dealing with just the grief of your parent dying, right? But if that's the only thing that you're working on, if that's the only thing that's happening in your life, you're going to burn out. It's going to happen. You're just going to be overwhelmed and stressed, and not to mention, it's going to feel like, you're like, what am I actually doing here? How am I even helping, right? So I have found one of the best ways to manage my own anxieties and issues with this productivity and all that is to diversify your productivity, diversify the things that with your curiosity. Have other projects, have other things that you're doing that are not necessarily just for some lofty goal, right? Like, especially if it's having other things that aren't just monetarily valuable, right? Like the joy of just reading a book for the sake of reading a book, right? The joy of going to school and learning for the sake of learning, not for, which we all have struggled with, right? What's the point of going to university? All the jobs are going to be gone anyway. There's no sense in me going. Why would I even study the humanities? AI knows everything. It's just a pathway to despair. What about the sake of learning just for there's the fun and joy of learning, and of also all the problems that come with it. There's challenges that include in that.
It's about the journey, not the destination.
Well, there's that kind of thing, but of course, that's part of it, right? But yeah, for that, cooking a good meal, like go back to my cooking, right? I want to cook a good meal so that I can give it to my wife and we can enjoy it together. There's that. But even just the process of learning how to cook for the sake of me being able to say, yeah, I can cook now, right? That's valuable to me.
Yeah, I love that.
And that comes from curiosity.
I love that idea of diversifying your curiosity. Like think about the way you're supposed to invest. You're not supposed to put everything into one stock. That's a good way to risk all of your investments.
That's right.
And I think this could be a really good way for us to kind of transition into talking about athletics a little bit. I'm really grateful that I've kind of tapped into a lot of hobbies. I think for that reason, to try to just kind of diversify what I'm putting my mind towards. That's really helped me. I think a thing on the flip side of that is, I've developed some level of adaptivity at a lot of things, but I'm really not at the top of anything, which I think is fun. I'm an okay golfer. I'm an okay music mixer. I'm an okay podcaster, and it's fun. But a lot of people are striving for excellence at something, and we hear you and me would say, like we're talking about balance right now. So balance is really helpful. Steve Nash has a quote though, that if you're pursuing excellence, balance can wait. So you and I, we have both been high level swimmers where there was a time where we probably didn't feel overly balanced because we were pursuing excellence. And we have since transitioned out of that space to now talking about what we're talking about now. You have a really unique, I think, story being a really elite swimmer. For those who don't know, you're quite successful with it. But you transitioned out of the sport in your early 20s, and it impacted you just like it impacts everybody else. Do you want to get into that now? What do you think?
Of course.
Yeah. Tell us your story, Will, about how you went from being pretty close to making the Olympics for Canada as a 100 flyer to transitioning out of what was your identity, and what was that like for you, and what'd you do?
Thanks, John. That's really interesting, thing that I've reflected on quite a lot, and I think there's something interesting here that every conversation is nuanced, right? So, I was just talking about how if you diversify your curiosity, you're going to have a more adjusted, well-balanced life. I love that idea from Steve Nash that if you're going for excellence, just put yourself all the way in and just go for it. There could be arguments to say that maybe that's not the most healthy way of doing it, but
Sure.
you know, it depends on what we're talking about. If we're talking about you're just going to be this, you're going to be go for pro, right? Then sometimes, yes, it requires that kind of one-dimensional kind of thinking. And I think when I was a swimmer, I did have some of that, and it was quite comforting in a way, even though the challenges of being a high-level, swimmer at the time were immense, and required a lot of time, as you know as well. You and I were training together. It requires a lot of time, a lot of exhaustion, a lot of pain through practicing, and then the emotional ups and downs of not doing well in certain events that we really wanted to. It was a really wild experience that you and I had. But I also noticed, and you and I have talked about this, I didn't really have anxiety while I was swimming at that level. I had frustration, I had anger, I had some sadness after about going through things. I had some boredom, absolutely, but I did not have the same kind of level of stress about what I'm doing with my life until I had finished my swimming career. That it just all came flying in, and I think one of those reasons is, you could probably speak to this more than I could, which is the biochemical side of our nervous system, that because you and I were just training so hard and just swimming all the time, that we're releasing so many endorphins into our body that are helping us regulate our mood. We have a routine in which we are, committing up to 4 or 5 hours per day just for training. And we're just exhausted all the time. Who has time to stress about their life or what they're doing with it when you're just exhausted from pure physical exhaustion all the time? It was a fascinating experience, and also because we knew what we were going to be doing. We knew exactly what when people would ask themselves, like, what am I doing? Well, I'm swimming. Why are you swimming? To get faster. What do you mean? This is a stupid question.
I love the trivialness. Like, we have a friend that used to always say, like, yeah, you guys traverse through water. And it was hilarious the way he would make what was so meaningful to us sound so just trivial in nature. I think that was always so funny. I think about that all the time now. But I always tell people I was physically tired for like 15 straight years. It felt like, and to your point, and then you can kind of go back to your story, is there's a Latin phrase that I teach in my kin class that's, I'm going to butcher it, mens sana a corpore sano, which translates to a healthy mind and a healthy body. So your brain and your body are connected. So, I know for myself, and this is something I learned as well, which I'll share in a little bit, but when I am physically tired, it brings my thoughts and my mental state down to a level that is a lot more tolerable in terms of where my mind races. And I think my athletics and my commitment to swimming and the training that we did was dampening a lot of my thinking to a level that mitigated my whatever level of anxiety I would have had at that time. And we know that it's obvious now with research that being physically active mitigates, it enhances mental health by mitigating anxiety. So for me, I never really recognized that was happening, just because I was always doing it. I was always training. I was always being coached. I didn't have to think about what I wanted. It was always kind of beaten into us. And it wasn't until I stopped swimming that I sort of felt some of those things and realized, oh, I was benefiting from that mentally the whole time, but that was never my focus. So I totally agree with that part of your story.
You've got it, John. Yeah, that we were benefiting. Athletes benefit in ways that we don't recognize. We just think of it as, I'm moving towards this goal, whether it's a championship, it's a better time, personal best, beating the other, people on your team or in your division or whatever it is, right? but there's so many benefits that are coming through that you don't realize until you stop doing it, which is what happened to me. And this is, I would love to talk about this more. I think that transition from going from athlete to not athlete is very significant. I think people deal with this if they're finishing university, if they're just students, for example, or not just students, but they're students and they've been working hard and then they finish school. And it's very common to be like, what the hell is next? I don't know what I'm doing, right? But I do think that sense, that feeling is accelerated when you transition out of athletics, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, because it's so tied to your identity, who you think of yourself as. When you go to a party and you ask, people ask what you're doing, it's very easy to say, I am a basketball player, I'm a swimmer, I'm a gymnast, right? And then when that finishes, after a year, you're like, well, I did swim, and now I'm a bartender, which is basically what I had. Not that there's anything wrong with being a bartender. I quite liked it, but there's such a strength of identity that comes from athletics that you just suddenly lose. So you're losing all of the routine that you had. You're losing the constant endorphins that are being pumped into your body to regulate your emotions because you're working out all the time. You've lost then your sense of awareness of your surroundings because you're no longer going back to the same gym or to the same pool or to the same place every day, where you're not meeting the same people all the time, and you don't have that solid goal anymore, which is get the championship, get to the Olympics, get the personal best, finish the season on a good note, whatever it is. All of that just goes away. So I really struggled with that, and I didn't realize it. I didn't even realize that was the problem until many years later. But I look back on it now, I'm like, oh, that's why I was freaking out so much. Because my entire identity had just crumbled once I had stopped swimming, and I didn't realize how much of an effect it was having on my life, both positive and negative. I think I had focused so much on, I am done with this, which is the greatest feeling when you, I'm sure there are many athletes out there who would feel like this. When you finally stop and you're like, wow, there's a world outside of this.
The good life.
This is insane.
Taste of the good life.
Yeah, and I partied. I had a great time. I had time to do things. It was incredible. But after a little while, it started to settle in. Now I'm wondering, John, would you say that your experience of this was similar in any kind of way? What was that transition like for you?
Yeah, definitely similar in a lot of the things that you're describing. I think in our two stories, I think there's one difference that I'm going to highlight in a minute. But I always tell people that for me, it kind of felt like there were three phases when I reflect on the last, decade of being out of elite sport. I think there was, chapter one was a taste of the good life. So there was, I subdued a lot of these other curiosities to commit to my one thing to pursue high level results. And I finally got to do those things again. So I got to get more into rec basketball, and, I got to get out there socially a little bit more. And the first couple of years were, like you said, it's like, oh, this is done. I can, the hours of 4 to 6 p.m. now exist. Like, what? Oh my gosh, I can watch sports highlights in the morning. This is amazing. So that was like sort of the first couple of years. And then there was a little bit of a fade in that where I started feeling anxiety for the first time because I wasn't being as active, and I was sort of feeling a little bit purposeless and a little bit of that identity struggle that you described. I think, I talk about identity a lot with my students as being something I kind of went through because I focused so much on, I identified so much in the results of my athleticism that I had to reorientate myself to identify in the qualities that being a swimmer actually gave me. So that was a big shift that I had to make that we can talk about. And then there was sort of the last chapter, which was where I think I'm at now, is realizing the benefits of being an athlete and the qualities that come with it, like discipline and ability to connect with people and take criticism from other people, other than just your family, things like that. And I'm now replacing swimming with other things to highlight my ignite my curiosity and my productivity. So, it's always talked about that if you get rid of something in your life, whether it's a positive habit like athletics, like something you identify with, or whether it's an addiction, the only way to the meaningful way forward is you need to replace it with something else. I don't think I recognized that right away. There was definitely a period of just swimming is done, let's go, and then I learned that when I put your identity in results, you have to then replace that with something. And I think something that's different between the two of us, even though we were both swimmers, we're both on the same team, we're best friends. I think you did a really good job in your swim career of not constantly thinking about results, but I think you put your identity in, you enjoyed training, you took interest in other people, you loved just being in the race atmosphere, and I think that helped you relax and just perform. And I think it's one of the reasons why I could keep up with you in training, and then I got my ass kicked by you at swim meets. And then I think your struggle, as you described, was when you stopped swimming, trying to identify in all of the qualities that swimming gave you. That took you time. Whereas I feel like my story is almost flipped. I think I was so fixated on results when I was swimming that I struggled to kind of in the moment just relax and be in the moment with my performance and just kind of be happy and free and loose. And I think that held me back from like a sports psychology perspective now that I look back. But I'm thankful that when I stopped swimming, I think I was able to realize pretty quickly, like, hey, you're a hard worker. You know how to train. You're disciplined. And I think I really injected that into my career and into some of my other hobbies, which I think helped me establish a new identity outside of swimming. So I think it's interesting the way different people can react in these scenarios, and it's I'm really grateful that we can like talk about this stuff. It's really cool.
Right. Well, I really appreciate that, Johnny. I think you really pointed out some things that I didn't actually recognize about myself as well in that experience. I really did enjoy just being at the pool. I whenever I think back to my experiences, in swimming, it's not about the times for me. It wasn't about winning the races, even as much as I really did want to win. It was the sense of presence that I had when I was swimming in an environment of people who I also want to support and help them achieve their goals, But I think you really were able to transition well out of athletics. I think and we both did eventually, but I do think that you were able to do it better in some ways because you moved into teaching, and you found teaching, or maybe teaching found you in some ways, as you would say it, as another pathway for you to go out once we'd finished university, or once we'd finished our journey in swimming career. And I think you leaning into that, was incredible. I think it worked really well. You had already had all the coaching background. You'd know what it was like to be a coach, what it was like to be an athlete, and really just walking headfirst into this teaching world. And then here you are now. What's this, like 12 years later? You've been a teacher, maybe longer. I don't know how long you've been a teacher, John.
About just over 10 years. And yeah, thank you for saying that. Yeah, it doesn't feel like it's been 10 years, but
I know, right?
Yeah, like for any young people, like there was a lot of unknown with is this the way forward?
Right.
And I always say that there's no sense sitting in the analysis paralysis. Like it's better to wander, not knowing if the destination is right, and to end up somewhere, than to just kind of sit and be like, I don't know what's next. I'm very grateful that, all of this happened for a reason. It was not because of me knowing the best way. It didn't come from wisdom. It just happened. I thank the universe for that. But I think there's a lot of things, going back to like, what do you take from your athletics? Being not the most committed student in the world, there were a lot of things about being a high level athlete that I thought that all the time. I was like, you know what? I could have been more committed academically. I didn't do that. So I better lean into these qualities that I did take from swimming. Being somebody who was criticized by a variety of coaches, not just teachers and parents, being someone who could have a hard shell in that way, knowing that I could show up every day, twice a day, and that people around me weren't going to do that. I made that my identity rather than, hey, I'm a swimmer who goes 51 in the 100 free or whatever. I really struggled with that while I was swimming, but when I finished, I was like, well, I don't have this sport anymore. I don't have these results. Nobody cares that I traverse through water quickly, but people might care that I can show up every day. People might care that I can work hard. So, let me lead into those things. So, for anybody, if you were passionate about something and you stopped doing that thing, think about the skills and the qualities that thing did give you that are transferable into other things. And that connects brilliantly back to our previous conversation about learning skills and showing up every day in the classroom. You're not going to remember exactly the content that you were taught in high school, but it might be like what your teacher put you through and what you had to do from a learning skill standpoint. That's going to be all the more important, in this world that we live in.
Yeah, absolutely, John. I think you really hit on something that is just so important for people to understand, especially the athletes that are out there, that transitioning and or athletes and just students, when you're in when you're in something, when you've given all of your attention to something for so long and then that thing ends, really thinking about what are those skills that you got from that experience. It's not just the thing itself, right? Like you said, we didn't just learn how to traverse through water better. We didn't just learn how to get off a diving block, in less than 0.7 seconds or whatever. Those were things that came with it, but the transferable skills that came with it are incredible. And they go such a long way. And you've been very helpful throughout my transition to remind me of that, because I always forget about that. So, for example, I was, this was a couple weeks ago, I was just tripping about like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do my job plus school and like keep up with all the things that I've been doing. But then I think you sent me a video that was just like, remember, like when you were in athletics, you learned how to work towards something, even though you knew that it was going to be difficult and there was no guarantee that you were going to achieve the goal. Mm. And that is like a huge skill that I forget all the time, that when you're in athletics, you are working towards something that has no guarantee at all that you're going to achieve it. There's actually everything that's working against you, whether it's the actual physical environment itself or the competitive environment that's working against you. And if you can apply that to your own life, whether it's another business venture that you want to do, or trying to learn a new skill, or taking a job that you really don't know much about, if you can apply that skill of like not knowing what's going to happen, but having the goal to go through it anyway and endure the pain that it's going to cause and the suffering, you can accomplish so much. And this is just one of the many skills that we learn from being in athletics.
Mm-hmm. And I think it doesn't have to just be athletics. I mean, we're obviously biased as former athletes, but yes, if you pursue excellence in something, which I think everybody should do, there's going to be skills that come from that. And I think it's so easy to put identity into results because results is what you can tell people. In the social media world where everybody's looking to be validated by other people, results is what gets you likes and And results is always going to give you shallow relationships, but put your identity into the deeper stuff. You know, your best friends in the world, your acquaintances might know you from the results. They might say, "Oh, that guy's a jokes teacher," or you know, Will's a really awesome swimmer when he goes to lane swim. They might know you from those little things. But your best friends, they're never gonna, when they say, "Hey, tell me about John," or "Tell me about Will," they're never gonna bring up that stuff. They're gonna describe some quality about you. So,
Right.
so you know, something I try to bring to my classroom is put your identity into something that is authentic to the human experience. You know, like curiosity, rather than just, "Hey, I did this one time."
Yeah.
But that's tough in our social media world. Like we're sort of constantly fighting against that in our culture. So,
That's some of those qualities, you know, they're difficult to, if even possible, to show in social media, right? Like, for example, if you're trying to show kindness, you know, while in a reel, you know, it's already going to feel a little bit vapid because people are going to be like, well, no, you're just performative, right? You're just
Yeah.
performing kindness, right? But our friends, the people around us, our family members, when they talk about us, we want them to recognize those characteristics. Oh, he's just a really, really genuinely kind person, right? He's someone who is curious. He actually has a really open mind. You know, these are the qualities that we would hope, or at least I would hope, that my friends say about me. I don't really care if they know how much money I made last year or how fast I used to go in swimming or whatever. Those things can be nice to, if they are connected to some of those deeper values of the human experience, right? Like he did so well in this sport because
Right.
he persevered and he has got such a great, you know, an endurance of spirit to go through what he went through, which is what I feel about you and some of my other friends. You know, when I think about, I have a few friends who are doctors, right? I don't think about their skill out being a doctor. I wouldn't even know what that is. I have no idea. But you know, like, I don't know. What do you? Yeah, like, you're doing surgery. Like how I don't know, like how much less jitters they have than most people. I don't know. But it's more like, I think about, wow, what did it take? What did that mindset take to go through 10 to 12 years of school and giving thousands and thousands of dollars and all of your time? That says something more, I think, about the doctor than the actual skills themselves.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something really, really important, and that is that we are, and I'll tie this back to what you said. We are meant to be in community with each other. That is part of the human experience. So all of these skills that we're talking about that you want to put your identity in, I think, or we think, these are all things that you can use to serve other people and not just ultimately yourself. You know, my result in a swim race or your result in a swim race has no ability to do anything for another person. And if you look at any religion or even any psychology journal, that meaning in life is usually gathered from how you can serve your neighbor and show love to other people. So I love to do this exercise with my students. So we could do it right now as an example. So let's think of two ways that we see ourselves. So if I was to ask you, Will, like what are two qualities that you think you have? You want to throw two words out there? You want to do this live?
Philosopher and genuine.
Okay, perfect. So philosopher, so kind of curious thinker and genuine. Okay. So now let's identify, could those be used to serve other people? I would say yes, because being curious can spark conversation. I'm having a great time right now talking to you.
Right.
And genuine, like you're a real guy, that's relatable, that helps people feel comfortable around you, right? Now I'm going to challenge you to, do you want to think of two ways that maybe sometimes, if you're being really honest, you try to come off this way to other people? If you're being real honest, what are two ways that you're like, I try to give off this vibe sometimes?
I try to get off the vibe sometimes that I know more than I do. That I want to be seen as someone who is intelligent, you know,
Sure.
who and I think this comes from my past when I just wasn't very good at school, and then kind of always people just thought I was the dumb guy who didn't figure things out, which was there's some valid statements behind that. I've done some stupid things in my life, But I think that's one way that I want to be seen as someone who's intelligent.
Sure.
And the other would be someone, I guess, who is able to endure the stresses of life. I want to be more. I want to be seen as someone who's more calm in really stressful situations. But I certainly am not always like that.
Yeah. So let's
more often than not, I'm not.
Yeah, and not that I want to take this into some unqualified way of me assessing things, but so
Give it to me, John.
So yeah, so like for me, for example, it'd be like sometimes I try to come off like things don't bother me, like that things just bounce off me like I'm careless, right? So sometimes the way that we wish to be seen by other people can sometimes be a little bit more self-serving, right? So you saying I want to come off like I kind of know everything all the time, right? In a way, that doesn't really serve other people. AI can do that. AI is all knowing, right?
True.
Right? So when do you feel happier? When people think you know everything, or when you are genuine and curious and philosophical, right?
Absolutely.
So something I try to implore with my students is we actually do this activity. We write, how do you see yourself? How do you see other people? And what almost always ultimately happens is the way we see ourselves is usually the serve others mindsets, the ones that actually contribute to community more, and the qualities that end up making us happier. And that's what I learned the hard way through sport is when I was focused on the self-serving things, like I want to do this time to qualify for this meet so I could tell everybody that I went to this swim meet and raced against this person. I thought that was going to bring me all of this stuff. It didn't. But then when I started leaning into these qualities that allowed me to serve other people, I started to then get individual attention and recognition. Like it almost worked backwards in a way. And I think we were created for that to be the case. So I think if you're an athlete or you're good at anything, the qualities that you've learned that can serve other people are going to be the only ones that are going to matter when you finally move on from whatever that thing is.
I love that. I really appreciate you doing that exercise with me because that's very informative, and I would recommend anybody who's listening to try that out. Going through how do you see yourself and then how do you want others to see you. It's a great way of trying to understand, how you can orient yourself in the world. Go towards those things of who you are. And like you said, that idea of how you can serve others is fundamental, I think, to a happy, joyful life full of meaning. There's a great psychologist, an Austrian psychologist. His name is Alfred Adler.
Ooh, tell me about him.
Yes, he's awesome. He was writing at the same time and practicing at the same time as Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, two names that were probably more well known. But within the psychological world, Alfred Adler was way ahead of his time. And one of the concepts that he purported and spread out to the world that I really think hits to something deep here is when we're trying to have a more well-adjusted life, we need social interest. That social interest is a necessary component for a joyful, meaningful life.
Totally agree.
Because without it, when we can just feel like all that we're doing is either just for ourselves or it's towards some very like mundane or basic thing. But if we can figure out in what way is it that our life and our actions are serving others in some form, in what way are they interested, you can start to really quell those things like we've been talking about today: the despair, the anxiety, the burnout, the boredom. Because you can feel like you're really doing something for others, and it doesn't have to be as something very like obvious, like volunteering or teaching or whatever. Like you're helping others very clearly. It could be something like if you're a painter, you're not you're painting for yourself, but
Right.
you're sharing your creativity with the world. You're perhaps inspiring others. You're showing people different your own thoughts. You're being vulnerable about your skills as a painter. You're purporting like the creative environment.
Yeah, well, any art is by definition a serve others thing, because you are creating and not consuming. So you are invoking action that is then going to be perceived by somebody else. So you may not think of it as like, volunteering or giving blood or something like that, but
Yeah.
by definition, it can be a tool to serve others. I don't think anything, like you said, it doesn't have to be the most direct. I'm going to the community or donating money, but does it have even the most slight ability to serve other people? Like lean into that. Like the worst thing you can do to a human is put them in solitary confinement.
Seriously.
We need social interaction. Like who's that guy again? That was really cool. What was the philosopher's name?
The guy I just talked about.
Yeah.
His name is Alfred Adler.
Yes, yeah, very cool.
Adler. Yes. And to that point, John, that if we look at a jail, for example, the people who survive in jail and without coming out completely out of sorts and whatever, is they found some way of building community in jail. They
True.
tried to help someone. We've seen lots of studies through this, like the people who fall into despair from their situation are usually those who don't have any interest in trying to, or are not able to see the interest in that they, or their impact on their environment, on the people around them, right? And I like to think about this also for the business people out there, who perhaps are in environments that maybe do feel more financially motivated or monetarily motivated, right? But even in those environments, you can think like, what is my product that I'm trying to sell? What impact is that having on my community? And maybe it's not huge, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you could think, well, how am I treating my coworkers? How am I showing up with my my work environment? How am I helping the people in my organization? Like, these are all part of social interest as well, So I think it's very easy for us to just think like, oh, I'm in this environment in this particular job, and there's nothing about my job that helps the world. It's like, but there are other ways that you are, giving or you are having an impact,
Yeah.
and it's and if you're really looking at your life and you're like, my life, I don't have any social interest. There's nothing that I'm doing that's helping the wider community. That's something to think about, And when you do get to that point, you can. I hope anybody who's listening to this, you can realize that there are so many ways.
Yeah.
There are so many ways that you can do that.
Business
It doesn't take just volunteering or whatever.
the business example is a good one for a couple of reasons there that you hit on. Like the whole dog eat dog idea of business. I hear a lot of people say, like, I went into the corporate world and it ate me alive. I was totally burnt out. Like, going back to our topic of burnout, there's such a focus on performance, results, and productivity
Yes.
that doesn't serve anybody, that people get really worn out by that. But to your point, there are ways to not focus on that when you're in that field. Like, I have a friend, shout out to Mike. He's a sales guy, and we worked in the same room during the pandemic because we were roommates. So I got a front row seat to his sales job, and he really changed the way I viewed sales, because he's a curious guy. He just asked people questions, and people just came to him, and he sold all kinds of product to people, and he wasn't pushy at all. He wasn't focused on himself or his numbers, and it really changed the way I viewed a successful salesman. And I just said, like, I was like, I would be so much more aggressive, like, going after these sales than you are, yet you're killing it. Like, what's your secret? And he just said, like, if I'm just easy to talk to, I'm gonna be the one they call back. And I was like, he's just thinking about serving other people, and the universe is going to pay him back. And I thought it was really, really cool. I love how our conversations kind of brought us to really, I think, like the essence of the human experience is that we need other people, and we also want to be needed so that we can give purpose, to our community, which I think is a really great way to kind of wrap up, these topics of performance, curiosity, and where the world is going, adjusting to technology. Really, really neat stuff, man.
I love it, John. Yeah. No, I really appreciate you being here. This has been part of our own creative project that we hope has some social interest in it. We hope the greater society might want to hear some of these ideas. But regardless, I think just having this conversation in and of itself was very valuable to me. And I just really appreciate you being here and being a great friend.
Yeah, this was a great conversation, man. It's not too dissimilar from what we would do not on a podcast. So
That's right.
lots of fun.
It's amazing what you can do when you just hit record. Yes. All right. Well, we will definitely be doing this again in the future. Thank you so much, John.